Wesley
the Book
Huff.
of Enoch is nuts.
That's
I talked
the
to Wes
Giants
Huff about
one.
it.
That's the Giants
It's
one,
not
right?
just the Giants, it's aliens. It's about the Watchers who came down and mated with human beings. Bro, I'm reading it right now.
I know you are.
Bananas. She told me to read it. And she's like, you have to read this. It's nuts.
And what did Wes Huff say? Did he say
Yeah, it's 100% a legitimate text. It's legitimate religious text, but they decided not to include it because it's so nuts and because it goes against like what the writings of the Torah.
Right.
So, but it was a few rabbis. Just a few rabbis decided.
Like
if the Book of Enoch was included in the Bible, it changes the whole
Why would
story
the
of the
rabbis
human
decide
race.
what goes
Back
into the
then
Christian?
they had that kind of power. They just decided that it doesn't get included in the canon. This is a long time ago.
But yeah, I mean, this is like around. Well, who decided the canonized Bible, right? This is like Constantine time, right?
Well, that's for the New Testament, right? And so with the Old Testament, you've got Wes Huff would be the guy to ask
Oh, wait a
all
minute.
these
Enoch
questions.
was included in the Old Testament.
Oh, it's old as fuck.
Oh, okay, got
Not
it,
only is it old
got
as
it.
fuck, when they found it, they also found a version of the Book of Isaiah that was really fascinating. They found a version of the Book of Isaiah that is verbatim the same as a version of the version of Isaiah that was 1,000 years later, which they thought was the original.
Unbelievable.
That's what's crazy. For 1,000 years, they maintained the exact same story verbatim, writing it down and passing it on. And the Book of Enoch's in there with that. And the Book of Enoch is bananas.
Yeah, I think we might need to do a little deep dive on the Book of Enoch.
The Book of Enoch, it says that these Watchers came down and mated with human beings and created a race of giants called the Nephilim who consumed and destroyed everything in front of them. Gee, that sounds like people. That sounds a lot like people. If you got a bunch of little chimps and then you got these tall aliens and they make a fucking 7-foot man, you know, a Viking who's like chopping off heads and lighting villages on fire and has this unstoppable desire for conquest, that's humans. The Nephilim sounds like humans.
Like exactly. So they're not giants. We are the giants. And then what if the other folks?
They might have been giants. Like it's hard to say.
But what if the other folks were the Neanderthals?
Well,
because there was a time where we're living together, right?
Right. Well, they were here before us, allegedly. Well, this is the question: is like, where did humans come from? There's a really interesting show on PBS right now called Human, where this lady goes on this journey of. It's like. She's, what is her degree in? Is she an anthropologist? I believe she's an anthropologist, but, or maybe some sort of biologist, but she goes over the history of the human species. It's very interesting. The migration from across the Bering Land Bridge into North America, when the oldest people started coming here, how they came here. Fascinating stuff. But that's one of those things, like if you think ancient history is filled with horseshit, like ancient human history, like of the humans, that's the woman's name. I don't want to fuck up her name. Ella al-Shamahi. And it's on BBC and PBS. Really good show. She's a paleontologist, degree in genetics and taxonomy and biodiversity. But they just found recently a human skull that pushes the date of humans back another 500,000 years.
Yeah.
So it's like all they know is what they find in the fossil record, and there's so little fossil record. And then they keep finding new things. Like they just found Denisovans in like 2010. They're like, whoa,
what is that?
What's this? Total new branch of the human tree.
It's called
Denisovans.
Denisovans.
Yeah, they found like a bunch of teeth, I think, in Asia, and they're like, what the fuck is this? And then or maybe it was Russia. So there's that. There's the one that they found in China, the big head people.
That's the one that I
real
saw.
recent. That's real recent. I forget what that one's called. We've done this a million times, but I always forget. But so they're always finding these new versions of humans. So how many of them really were there? But if aliens are coming down and like, let's try them where they're short and really powerful and they only eat meat. And that's Neanderthals. Like, stop. This one's not a good design. This is not a good design. We need them a little more frail so they invent things. Because the brutes don't invent anything.
Yeah, more frontal cortex.
Yeah, the Neanderthals had bigger brains than us. That's what's interesting.
So then what part of our brain was specifically different?
See, we have a very, our idea of them is that they were dumb and they couldn't talk and that they were brutes. But it doesn't seem like that's true. In fact, it seems like they had art, they definitely had tools, and they had language. And they might have been as smart as us. They were just different. And maybe us being a little weaker is what made us smarter. You know,
Or made us work collectively.
maybe we're a little more alien, just a touch.
Right.
There's a little too much salt in that stew. Let's add a touch more of us. And, you know, it seems like the hairy, 5'7", 200-pound fucking savages with big eyes that might be able to see at night, because it looks like they might have had night vision. The Neanderthal eye socket's way bigger than ours. Their skull's thicker. Their bones are more dense. They might have had night vision, like a dog. You know how dogs, their eyes glow when the headlights hit them? They might have had that same ability.
I mean, I don't know why
That design's too sketchy.
It's just not
They
working.
can see at night,
Yeah.
and then they go hunting other people. This is too much.
But then we hunted them.
Maybe we might have just fucked them.
I also heard we fucked them.
Well, I think
you
we
had that
hunted them and
joke,
we
right?
fucked
You're
them.
like, I got a little bit of yeah.
One more time with the monkey.
But in terms of like the stories, like, all right, you know when a comic gets off stage and like they think they killed but they bombed,
Right.
like there could be people telling those stories in the books.
There could be.
Like meaning what their rendition of what happened
Yes.
is in the book, and that is what they truly believed happened. They might not even be delusional. They are
Right.
delusional, but like that's what they saw, and that's
Right.
what happened to them.
And history is always written by the winners.
Exactly.
Yeah. My version of the Bible story back in the day, I used to have this bit about Noah's Ark. I was like, the problem with the Bible is people are full of shit, and that story sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it's that simple all the time. I've never met any politician or any person who's in charge of anything that's like really important that I would say never lies. So if you're back then where there's zero accountability, zero video, zero anything, they can't even write.
Well, that's where the cross-referencing makes sense, right? It's like that's when you got a bunch of different people saying the same thing or similar things. You start to go, okay, maybe this did happen.
Terence McKenna once said it best, that science asks of you one miracle. That's the Big Bang.
Yeah.
There's one miracle. It really is kind of like a miracle. If in the beginning there was nothing, and then God created the earth and the skies. And it's essentially what the Bible is trying to say. They're just doing it in a way.
And the Bible got it right. They got the order right.
Right.
You know?
I think it's based on an understanding that people had achieved. Because if you think about the Bible, right, and if all these people are correct about the original history of sophisticated civilization, if the Randall Carlsons and the Graham Hancocks and the Robert Shocks of the world and the John Anthony West, if they're correct in the timeline of, like, say, the most sophisticated society that we are aware of, which is Africa, if those people that lived in Africa 30,000, 40,000 years ago in Egypt, if they created a society that was infinitely more sophisticated than anything that we had ever seen before, like, how did they do that? Who did that? And what was that like? Like, what the fuck was that like? I mean, have you ever really stopped and tried to think and imagine what was that world like back then? I mean,
well, how about that you have a similar world in Central and South America where they also had built things many thousands of years ago that still, like, how the fuck did you do that?
Yeah. How'd you do that?
Easter Island. How did y'all make those things?
Yeah.
How in the world? And then move them?
Well, I think if those things go down and then people have to rebuild, I think it takes a long time before people figure out what happened. I think it takes a long time. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion that you see in the Bible comes from. Like, God made the earth and the sky and everything in like 6 days, right? And on the sixth day he rested. Okay. What are they actually saying, though? You're getting things that are translated from an oral history of 1,000 years, and then they're writing it down in Aramaic, they're writing it down in ancient Hebrew, and you're getting it many, 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 many years later, long after.
Diluted and warped.
All kinds of. Think about what people are willing to do today to the Constitution. Today. With all the information that we have about the dangers of this. Think about what they're trying to do today. Now imagine what you would do if you had the real knowledge of the birth of the solar system, of the development of human beings, and the God energy of the universe, and you tried to translate it over an oral history because there's chaos, because there's no more cities anymore, and everyone's dead, and you're just like hunting and gathering as cave people, and you're trying to relay this origin story of mankind. And then it gets written down in parables, and it gets written down in Latin, and it gets translated over the years. And then people try, okay, then they sit down and they look at it many years later and they go, what the fuck were they trying to say? Like, what were they trying to say? Because so much of what they're trying to say, if you're really paying attention, like, it seems like it's kind of laid out. If in the beginning there was nothing, like they're talking about the Big Bang. If these scientists all agree, how did they know that?
Then
back
there was
then?
light. That would be the Big Bang.
Why wouldn't they assume back then that God was always around? Why would they assume that God had to make everything? Why would they assume that there was a beginning and an end just because they have a beginning and an end? Is that rational? Why would they assume that? And why did everybody assume that? Maybe because they fucking knew. Maybe because at one point in time, whether it's 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, they had figured a lot of this shit out.
Well, someone figured something out for the pyramids and the way that they were built to be aligned so perfectly with a true north and...
Just to be able to construct them. If those people were that smart, why wouldn't we imagine they had an understanding of the birth of the universe? Why wouldn't we imagine that they would have this bizarre understanding of the way morality and good and evil play out with human beings? Maybe they were right, but it all just got fucked up over the thousands of years after asteroid impacts and the thousands of years of the destruction of the advanced civilizations and the world going back into chaos and then slowly rebuilding. And you're rebuilding with these ancient texts that you find in clay pots in Qumran. And you ever seen when they translate like the Dead Sea Scrolls and they lay them out and they have to try to figure out which pieces go with which scroll and they do it based on DNA. All this DNA is from this cow, so let's take this scroll from this cow skin and put it together and try to read what the fuck they said. It's incredible. But it makes sense. It makes sense if you buy into the idea that there's been a restart of civilization. And then you go back and say, okay, what is the history of the Bible? Like, how old is it? What's the oldest version? Like, what's the oldest version of the stories?
Version. Like, who knows?
Right, who knows? Version. Right. What was the original? Like, you're playing a game of Telegram, right, or telephone with over 1,000 years, with who knows how many people. But if we've seen what the Egyptian people were able to build, what was that like? How sophisticated were they? And maybe what we're getting at in the Bible is just the longest game of telephone of a true story. It's just all kind of gumbled up in stories and God's testing you and all this thing about, God telling this guy to kill his kid. It's just a little screwed up, but it's showing you that there are evil forces at play and there are temptations.
It's digestible lessons in a story that you can understand.
Exactly,
and that's
but at the
why
heart of it, there's
days,
some truth to it.
Because what is a day to God?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Is that a billion years?
Yeah.
A million years?
100 billion?
Who knows?
Who fucking knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
But it's presented in a way that you can digest it.
This is kind of crazy. We didn't know they could do that back then.
Well, before coming out here, I asked ChatGPT, how old are some of the stories written down in the text in the Hebrew Bible? And at least according to ChatGPT, so...
Oh, my God.
Something may have happened at that time.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's a very interesting finding. Oh, Sodom and Gomorrah, that's a great story. I'm working on this translation of the Hebrew Bible. I've got a Substack now. I've been putting out things every week, a chapter a week.
Yeah.
On my translation of the Bible, it's like 1,000 pages right now of commentary about the language and the grammar, the meaning, what's called the plain meaning of the text. Like there was a Noah with 3 sons and went on the ark. Yeah. So that's like my big project, but I'd like to do a smaller one about Sodom and Gomorrah and the figure of Lot. I think that's a really incredible story. I've spent about maybe 2 to 3 weeks looking at that. Lot, his virgin daughters, the men circling his house, they're asking to know him. He ends up, in a cave with his 2 virgin daughters. They get him drunk, and he sleeps with them. Or, they lie with him anyway. Yeah, and out come 2 kids at a certain point, and they become very important. Later on, they're the beginning of the Messianic line. It's a very intricate, tale with a very, I think you can make some cool conversations between some of the main personages in the narrative. There was a book called The Red Tent.
Can I ask you about the Lot? Like, how old was that story?
Wow, that must be... Well, it's an explanation of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is the around the Dead Sea. There was a conflagration of some sort there. Have any of your guests spoken about Sodom? What actually happened around the Dead Sea?
Well, tell us.
Well, the story of Lot. Yeah, I mean, there was fire and sulfur pouring down on Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah, it was the end of the plain. Yeah, so that's the southern part of the Dead Sea. It is a Dead Sea because of its high salt concentrations. It was kind of closed off from the coast. So it's at least a description of what took place.
What do you think it's describing?
Well, I mean, my perspective is
a volcano.
It actually happened. Yeah, but people think a volcano. It's some kind of volcanic activity.
It totally sounds like a volcano, right? And we know that there's been a bunch of those that have almost wiped people out entirely at certain points. The Toba volcano, that one?
No.
We got down to, I think we've looked this up before, but I want to say they think we might have gotten down to just a few thousand people.
On the whole planet.
Like 70,000 years ago. 70,000 years ago, there was a massive super volcano that went off, and it, plunged the Earth probably into nuclear winter. And they think that our genetic line entirely of the human race on Earth came from this few thousand survivors.
Joe, can we take a
yes.
a break?
You gotta pee?
Yeah.
Yes. We'll be right back, folks. We're back.
Yeah, so we were talking about the alternative.
Yes. Explain what you mean by that. Like that these things are happening in an alternative dimension.
Right. Yeah, I think they're happening in an alternative dimension. Like when you smoke DMT, you return to the same place each time. So there seems to be some reality, some DMT world that people enter into. And it's one of my volunteers, one of the subjects in the DMT research. He got a big dose one day, and then a few months later, he got another big dose. And he said that it was very interesting. He said things have just continued apace since his first exposure and his first entrance into that state, and things had gone on in the meantime, and he re-entered that world. So in that way, there's in that same manner, the world of the Hebrew Bible early on, Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, Noah, the Tower of Babel, all that took place at some different level of reality, which gradually made its way into ours. And once it made its way into ours, there's the archaeological evidence, the first temple, second temple, and so on. So there is a transition between, our world and that world kind of merged. But in the beginning, it was an alternative dimension. It's the same God, I think, but different dimensions.
So, is this your own personal conclusion?
Yeah. Wow. Well, when I was on the show last time, you're asking if I believe those things took place, and my answer then was I take it as if it were true,
right?
And then I started to think, how I would do that. Like, in what world would that be true? It'd be a different world,
right? I feel like I've always believed that they were trying to record something. I just didn't always trust that human beings were completely honest with their recollection of events, so that there's something that they were trying to write down. But was it really coming from God? Are these accurate events? What exactly happened with Noah and the ark? Like what really happened?
Well, three stories, three levels. Two of each, then seven if one pair or seven pairs of birds. Well, of every living thing.
Yeah, but like, how's he feeding them? Animals eat other animals. The whole thing's nuts. You would need a lot more rabbits. You need so many animals to keep just the lions alive.
Right.
How's he getting them all from all over the world into his stupid boat?
Yeah.
There's so many things that are wrong.
Yeah.
But the story of him being told that some shit is about to go down, and you probably should, find some way to restart your version of civilization somewhere. There's probably multiple, like the flood myth that we, whatever you want to call it, the stories of the flood that you get from Epic of Gilgamesh, that you get from Noah. There's not just those. There's many different cultures all throughout history have a flood story, right? So it's probably likely that some crazy shit went down.
There may have been, there most likely was a flood. So what do you learn from it? Like how do you do better, or on what basis do you rebuild? So I think there's different models. The biblical one is interesting because it's lineage, from Adam to Noah,
right,
to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob and the tribes, and now.
So when you talk about things happening in an alternative dimension, like, is that what you think, like, the birth of mankind is as well, like Adam and Eve?
Well, I mean...
Pull this microphone up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It just has an impact.
Yeah. The creation story. Man was created on the sixth day.
Right.
Along with mammals. It's a cool story. It's, stages. People say, well, 7 days, that's unlikely. Like that creation took place 7 times 24, I don't know, 148. Something like that. 148 hours, 168 hours, the whole world was created. But it's broken into stages, 7 stages, which is one of the translations of the word that is usually translated day. It could also mean stage. It's the word yom. It could mean either a day, a period of time, a stage. So that's that's the answer that makes sense to me about the 7-day story of creation. Yeah. So man was created on the 6th day, and then was placed in the Garden of Eden, and those events took place. The stories themselves are just they're written down. And so people have been studying them for thousands of years.
Who do you think Lilith was?
No mention of Lilith in the Bible.
Really?
Yeah.
Where's the story of Lilith emerge?
Well, it comes from what's called midrash.
What's that?
It comes from a root, darash. It means to expand upon, to investigate. So what happened after Adam and Eve sinned? Did they have sex again? And they do have Cain and Abel and the ensuing stories. And then there's a third son, Shet, who is the inheritor of Adam's of his traits, his good traits and bad traits. He's like God as well. So there's a distinct lineage that is spelled out. Lilith was a demon that. She slept with Adam after the sin of eating from the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. So there's a story that built up around the biblical story that they were separated. Adam and Eve were separated for a long period. So who was Adam sleeping with? Well, it was expanded in the midrash that there was a demoness named Lilith who slept with Adam for a couple hundred years. And then Adam and Eve reconciled.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, so Lilith she doesn't appear in the text of the Hebrew Bible as such. So nobody knows. There's a mythology that's grown around Lilith as well. Well, isn't there some festival, some music festival called the Lilith Festival?
Lilith Fair.
That's named after the spirit or the demoness who's.
You sure it wasn't like a lady named Lilith that she came up with it? Are we sure?
It was her neighbor, Lilith Smith.